You know what they told me? They said they wanted me there. Swear up and down it wouldn't be the same without me. Fly out, Grandma, they said. We want you here for Thanksgiving. So what did I do? I packed the pie dish. I packed my cardigan. I packed every single ounce of softness I had left in me. And then, I waited. There I was, Gate 3A, Minneapolis, St. Paul Airport. Standing right there beneath that arrival sign with my wheeled suitcase next to me, coat folded neatly over one arm. People everywhere bustling past with flowers, balloons, little kids holding up signs. Some hugging, some crying. All of them being claimed. And me, I stood there like some misplaced package. The flight had landed 42 minutes ago. I checked twice. I also read that text from my daughter-in-law 3 times. We'll be there. Kids hurt emoji and everything. I sent back, flight lands at 30:10. Can't wait to hug everyone. No answer. I kept my coat folded because it was warm inside. Didn't sit down because, you know why? Because once you sit, you're giving up. You're giving in. I didn't want to look like some woman who'd been forgotten. Then my phone buzzed. Not a call, not even a text, just some social media notification. My heart beat faster. Not because I cared about those things, but because sometimes that's where my family posts pictures before they remember to call me. I opened it. And there they were. All of them. My son Greg is in that navy sweater I sent last year, his wife Malene, smiling big and tan like always. The kids, Elliot and Ruby, crowded around a table with candles, turkey, and mashed potatoes. A pie that wasn't mine. All of them holding up glasses in a toast. The caption, "Full house, full hearts. Happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours." I looked at that frame once more. There was no mistake. There was no space for me at that table. I didn't cry. Not then. I just turned around, pulled my coat on, and started walking. Out of the terminal, past the taxis, past the shuttle signs. I didn't know where I was going. But I knew one thing. I wouldn't be waiting for them to remember me. Let me tell you what happened 3 days before my flight. Greg called. That alone should have tipped me off. My son, unless there's a birthday, a bill, or a reason. But this time, his voice was syrupy smooth, overly cheerful. Hey Mom, you doing anything for Thanksgiving? I told him I was planning to stay home, roast a small chicken, maybe bake a pie if my hands cooperated. Watch an old movie. Nothing fancy. Just me and the radio. He paused, like he was calculating something. Well, he said, the kids were asking about you. Thought maybe you'd like to come here this year. Everyone will be together. It wouldn't feel right without you. That part. It wouldn't feel right without you. It did something to me. It's been a long time since I felt truly wanted anywhere. Needed, yes. Called on, depended on, but not wanted. There's a difference. So I said yes. Said I'd find a flight. Greg didn't offer to book it or reimburse me. I didn't ask. I still had that envelope with Christmas money I'd tucked away for emergencies. I thought this qualified. After we hung up, I stared at the phone. Tried to remember the last time I'd felt excited. Not worried or anxious or obligated, just genuinely excited. Last time someone invited me without adding a request for something. It had been years. I booked that ticket that evening. Found a non-stop on sale. Even paid the extra $12 for a seat with more legroom. Silly, maybe. But I figured if I was traveling halfway across the country, I might as well do it with a little comfort. The next day I went shopping. Not just for gifts. Though I did pick up 2 books for the kids and a box of those dark chocolate truffles Maline used to like. No, I also bought something for myself. A new cardigan, navy blue, soft wool. The kind that drapes just right and makes you feel like maybe you belong in the picture too. I packed 3 days ahead. Checked the weather in Minneapolis. Set my heat to low, and took the trash out early. I didn't tell my bridge group I was leaving. They'd only ask too many questions. And maybe part of me didn't want to jinx it. It had been so long since someone said, "Come, we want you here." Flew out Thanksgiving morning. The airport was crowded, full of people with rolling bags, headphones, and pillows shaped like animals. I smiled at a baby across the aisle, shared a look with another older woman reading a paperback. Both of us with our hands in our laps, both with stories unspoken. When that plane landed, I smoothed down my skirt and brushed crumbs off my lap. I'd brought my good shoes, the black ones with the tiny heel. I wanted to look like the kind of woman you invite. And I believed I was. Until I wasn't. The walk from baggage claim felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the weight of the suitcase. Maybe the weight of something else entirely. I rolled my bag past coffee kiosks, families reuniting, and that young woman crying with joy into her boyfriend's shoulder. I didn't feel bitter then, just displaced. Like someone had hit pause on me while the rest of the world kept moving. Outside, the sky was gray with that dull Midwestern light that makes even the air feel heavy. My phone was still quiet, no texts, no missed calls. I checked the time, 3:54 p.m. Thanksgiving dinner probably wouldn't start until 5 or 6. Maybe they were busy. Maybe the kids were being wild, or the turkey needed basting. There were a dozen reasons. All of them are harmless. But even harmless reasons sting when you're standing alone at arrivals. I waited on that curb another 20 minutes before my knees began to protest. Sat on a bench. Watched strangers climb into cars that knew their names. Watched a woman in a puffy jacket bring her mother-in-law hot chocolate and a hug. The mother-in-law looked older than I. That hug, brief, tight, real, landed right in the hollow part of my chest. I tried calling. Greg didn't pick up. Left a message. Said I'd landed. Said I was at the usual pickup point outside door B under the sign with the airplane. Said I hoped everything was okay and that I'd wait a little longer. But I already knew. I knew before I opened that app again, before the photo loaded, before I saw the cranberry sauce and the long wooden table, and that caption about hearts being full. It wasn't the first time I'd been forgotten, but it was the first time I let myself admit that's what it was. I stood up, dusted off my coat, and pulled that suitcase behind me. No cab, no Uber, just me and the sidewalk. A man pushing a stroller offered a tired smile. I nodded back. Funny how in airports, you can sometimes feel more seen by strangers than your blood. Nearly 5 by then. The air had turned sharper. The kind of chill that slides under your collar and asks, "What now?" I didn't answer. Just kept walking. About half a mile out, just past a car rental return, I saw it. This squat little building with a neon sign. Tina's Diner. I flickered in and out. Windows were fogged up from the warmth inside. Someone had taped paper turkeys to the glass. I went in. The bell above the door jingled. Inside, that diner smelled like hot grease and cinnamon. Vinyl booths, yellowed menus. A counter with cracked stools. Maybe 6 people inside. A man in a UPS jacket, an older couple eating in silence, and a waitress with a short ponytail who looked up when I entered. "Happy Thanksgiving, hun, same to you," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I picked a booth near the window, slid in. The seat was warm, and the table was clean. "Kitchen's slow today," the waitress said, handing me a menu. "But we've got turkey and pie." "Pea sounds good," I said. "What kind?" She grinned. "Pumpkin, pecan, or key lime." "Pumpkin and some tea, please." "You got it." I looked out the window while I waited. My suitcase sat beside me like an obedient little dog. My phone, face down on the table, vibrated once. I didn't flip it over. The pie came. It was warm with a dollop of whipped cream that leaned a little. The tea was strong and slightly bitter, just the way I like it. I took a bite, then another. It was the best piece of pie I'd had in years. Maybe not because of the spices or the crust. Maybe because for once I hadn't made it for anyone else. I ate slowly, didn't rush, didn't scroll. Didn't wait for anyone to show up and tell me it was all a misunderstanding. They weren't coming, not today, maybe not ever, and still, there I was. Whole, breathing. Sitting at a booth under paper turkeys, letting the heat return to my fingers. When the waitress brought the check, she asked, "Want another slice to go?" I thought about it. Then I nodded. "For later." She winked. "Best decision you'll make all day," I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because she was right. The air bit sharper when I stepped back outside. That little white bag with my second slice of pie dangled from one hand, suitcase rolling behind me with a soft plastic rattle. I didn't have a plan, no hotel booked, no one waiting. But somehow I didn't feel lost. Not exactly. There's a kind of peace that comes when you finally stop expecting the people who hurt you to fix it. The wind picked up as I walked. It wasn't far to the nearest budget motel. I'd seen the sign while trudging from the airport. Valley Inn, weekly rates available. Nothing fancy, square, low, slung building with beige paint and a vending machine by the front door. But it had lights on, and right now, that was enough. Inside the lobby, a man behind the counter was watching football on a tiny TV. He glanced up when I entered, his face a map of boredom and fryer grease. "Need a room?" "Yes, just for one night. Single." I looked down at myself. My good shoes were scuffed from the walk. My cardigan smelled faintly of airplane. I nodded. He slid a form across the counter. ID and card. While he typed, I glanced at the TV. Some team in red and gold was losing badly. The man didn't seem to care. Room 114, he said, sliding me a key on a flimsy ring. End of the row. The room was just what I expected. 2 lamps with mismatched shades, a bedspread patterned in muted browns, a television older than both my children. But it was warm. Had a working heater and a surprisingly clean bathroom. I peeled off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed. My feet ached. My back ached more. But my heart, the part that should have been shattered, felt oddly intact. I stared at that phone for a long time before turning it back over. 3 missed calls from Greg, 2 from Maline, 1 text, "Mom, where are you?" No apology. No explanation. Just confusion, as if I had disappeared. As if I were the one who forgot to show up. I didn't reply. Instead, I unzipped my suitcase, took out my notebook, the one I use for grocery lists, and thoughts I never say out loud, and wrote something on a fresh page. I am not spare. I am not extra. I am not a side dish at someone else's table. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I underlined it. I could have cried. A year ago, 5 years ago, I would have. But tonight, the tears wouldn't come. What came instead was this odd clarity, like stepping into cold water. Shocking, but clean. It wasn't just about this dinner or the airport. It was the years that led up to it. The birthdays they skipped. The voicemails left unanswered. The last-minute invitations that always sounded like obligations, never joy. I remembered Christmas 2 years ago when Maline called and said, "Would love to have you over if it's not too much trouble getting there." That pause in her voice. The way she said it, I made them a ham. I took the bus. I remembered Greg's 40th birthday. I sent him a leather wallet with his initials engraved. He sent back a group text. "Thanks for the gifts, everyone." I remembered Ruby's school play. I found the live stream myself and watched on my little laptop with a glass of wine and a lump in my throat. She didn't know I was watching, nobody mentioned it, and still I kept showing up, until today. Maybe it takes standing on a curb alone, in a different city, to see the shape of what's been there all along. I wasn't part of their life. I was an accessory, a convenience, a placeholder for when they needed to remember their better selves. I looked around that motel room, ugly, honest, functional. It was the most honest place I'd been in years. I got up, made myself a cup of motel tea using the plastic coffee machine, and sat cross-legged on the bed with my second slice of pie. No china plate, no linen napkin, just a white paper bag and a plastic fork. And yet, it tasted like something I'd earned. The next morning I woke before the sun. It's a habit I never lost. Even after retirement, my body insists on being useful by 6. I made another cup of weak coffee and watched the sky lighten through the blinds. The pie was gone. The tea too. But the quiet stayed. At 70:12 my phone buzzed. "Mom, I'm so sorry. There was confusion with the pickup. We thought your flight was tomorrow. Can you come to the house today? The kids want to see you, Greg." No explanation for the photo. No mention of the dinner. No apology for posting a Thanksgiving without me in it. Just confusion and, "Can you?" I stared at that message, then set the phone down. I didn't answer. Instead, I got dressed, brushed my hair, and dabbed on a little lipstick. It wasn't about seeing them. I wasn't going. It was about dignity. About remind myself that I still have to decide how to present myself to the world. Even if no one was looking. The lobby had a bowl of bruised apples and a carafe of coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard. I took an apple, slipped it into my bag, and checked out. The man behind the counter barely looked up from his football recap. Outside, it was cold and clean. The wind had calmed. The sky was that kind of brittle blue that only happens in November, sharp, high, endless. I didn't go back to the airport right away. Instead, I walked. There was something I needed to do first. A mile down the road, tucked between a gas station and a closed tire shop, was a little postal annex. I stepped inside and asked for an envelope and a pen. "Do you sell stamps?" I asked. "Of course," said the clerk. She was young, kind, with chipped polish on her nails. "I need one for a letter to Massachusetts." She handed it over and I wrote the address from memory. Emma Wexler, 12 Pond Hollow Lane, Worcester, MA. My granddaughter Emma was Greg's daughter from his first marriage. The only one who still called just to talk. She was 23 now, finishing nursing school. She sent me pictures of her cat, told me when she passed exam sand, asked for my recipe for cornbread stuffing. The envelope stayed empty for a moment. Then I pulled out a page from my notebook and began writing. "Emma dear, you once told me I was your safe place. I want you to know that hearing that meant more to me than most things in this world. This Thanksgiving didn't go as planned. I flew across the country for a table I was never meant to sit at, but But I found something in the quiet that I didn't expect, room to remember who I am without waiting for someone else to say it first. I kept writing. Not bitter, not dramatic, just real. When I sealed that envelope, I felt lighter. At 10:35, I booked a ticket home, same airlines, same gate. Different women are boarding. The flight wasn't until evening. So I found a cafe near the terminal with big windows and good scones. I sat there for hours with tea and a pen, going over things that had been unspoken too long. I didn't write to Greg. I didn't call Malign. I didn't tell them where I was. They'd see the missed return call. Maybe wonder, maybe not. I wasn't angry. I was done. Around 4 p.m., the light changed, that kind of golden haze that makes even parking lots look beautiful. I watched a little boy run toward a minivan, his backpack bouncing. He turned and waved at his grandmother, who was slower but smiling. She waved back, and he ran to her, grabbing her hand like it was his anchor. I watched them until they disappeared. And I whispered to myself, not loud, not bitter, just clear. I deserved that too. The plane home was only half full. A blessing. I had a whole row to myself. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to make myself tidy for anyone else's comfort. The flight attendant offered a soft smile. Heading home or leaving it, I said. In a way. She didn't ask for more, just nodded and moved on. That quiet kind of understanding, uncommon and kind. I stared out the window during takeoff, watching the gray city shrink beneath us. As the plane lifted, the sky opened wider, blue above and below, and nothing in between except the dull hum of engines and my breathing. I thought I might feel grief again. I waited for it like you wait for turbulence. But it didn't come. I didn't feel peace, not yet. But I did feel still, rooted, present. That was new. Halfway through the flight, I pulled my phone from my bag and turned it on. I told myself I was only checking the time, but of course the notifications poured in. 4 texts from Greg, 1 voicemail. Mom, I'm sorry. Please call me. The kids were asking where you were. Malign said she thought you knew we moved dinner up a day. Can we talk? I didn't open the voicemail. I didn't delete it either. Let it sit. Let it wait the way I had waited. When we landed, it was already dark. My little city glowed in a way that was quiet and familiar. At home, my porch light was still on. I had left it on out of habit, as if expecting to return tired and full and folded into the warmth of family. Instead, I walked in with pie in my bag and a mind sharper than it had been in years. My house smelled like lavender and old wood. The radiator kicked on with a comforting clank. I set down my suitcase and hung up my coat. I moved slowly, not from age but from intention. I made a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd hosted years of Thanksgivings, where Greg once spilled gravy and Emma once cut snowflakes from napkins, where Malign had sat tight-lipped, looking at her phone more than my face. I looked around the room like it belonged to someone I was still meeting. Then I opened the drawer next to the fridge, that drawer with the files labeled, Greg, Emma, legal. I pulled out Greg's folder. It was thick, receipts, copies of checks, printouts of tuition assistance, an invoice from a mechanic I'd helped him pay when his transmission failed, the mortgage co-signing from 2010, the private preschool deposit I fronted for Ruby with a note in Malane's handwriting. We'll pay you back after the bonus hits. They never did. I turned each carefully. Not in anger, not even in sadness. In clarity. Then I reached for the thinner folder labeled Emma. Birthday cards, photos she'd mailed me, a printout of her college graduation announcement, handwritten notes in bubbly ink, a thank you for helping her cover a course fee, a postcard from Vermont. Wish you were here. Fall is wild and wonderful. I closed both folders and sat back. Then I reached for my notebook. And this time, I didn't write feelings, I wrote a plan. The next morning, I was at the bank before the doors even opened. Light frost coated the steps, making them slick. But I climbed them slowly and steadily, wearing my oldest boots and that same navy cardigan. The teller, a young man with kind eyes and a nervous smile, greeted me with the kind of politeness people reserve for the elderly. Good morning, Mrs. Wexler. How can we help you today? I'd like to speak with someone about my accounts, I said. All of them. He nodded, glanced at a screen, then called into the back. A few minutes later, I was ushered into a glass-walled office with soft chairs and the faint smell of printer ink. A woman named Natalie introduced herself as my account manager. She looked like someone who did yoga at lunch and always had almonds in her purse. What can I do for you today, Mrs. Wexler? I want to suspend all automatic payments. Every one of them starting today. She blinked. All of them? Less. She tapped a few keys, eyebrows rising slightly as she scanned the screen. You have quite a few recurring transfers to family members, tuition payments, car insurance, and some scheduled gifts to charities as well. Keep the charities, I said. Stop the rest. There was a long pause. Do you want to talk about why? I looked at her. Looked. And to her credit, she didn't fill the silence with fake concern. No, I said. I've already spent enough time explaining myself. She nodded. Understood. While she worked, I sat in the quiet of that office and watched the world move outside the window. A mother wrangling a toddler into a car seat. An older man pushing a walker. A delivery truck is idling too long. Don't, Natalie finally said. Everything's been suspended. I'll prepare the paperwork for full cancellation if you want to come back in to sign tomorrow. I will. She hesitated. There's also a power of attorney on file. Gregory Wexler. Do you still want him to have access? I felt my pulse slow, not rise. No, I said. Revoke it? Understood. She printed the form and I signed it with steady hands. By the time I left the bank, the frost had melted. I didn't rush. I stopped at the bakery on the corner, bought myself a fresh roll, and walked the long way home. It wasn't about punishing Greg. Not really. It was about drawing a line where I hadn't before. About recognizing that love doesn't grow from sacrifice alone. It needs light. It needs truth. Back home, I pulled the pie dish from the sink, washed it gently, and put it away. Maybe someday I'd make another pie. Maybe not. But I wouldn't make one for people who left me standing on a curb. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. Mr. Altman had handled our affairs for over 30 years. He'd helped us buy the house, settle my husband's will, even draft the first version of mine back in 2005. His voice was warm but cautious. Mrs. Wexler, I'd like to make changes to my estate, I said. And I want to establish a trust for Emma. He didn't ask why. He didn't have to. People like Mr. Altman have seen every version of family disappointment that exists. We set a time for the next day. When I hung up, I felt no triumph, no victory. Just clarity. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and tea cooling on the railing. A few neighbors passed by. One waved, one didn't. The street was quiet, and I felt not okay, not healed, but steady. Like I'd finally stopped knocking on a door that was never going to open. The next morning, the sky was soft and low, that pale winter gray that wraps around houses like gauze. I dressed slowly, not because I was tired, but because I didn't want to rush what came next. At 9 sharp, I was in Mr. Altman's office. Same leather chairs, same ticking wall clock, same stack of forms on his desk, though now his reading glasses were thicker and his mustache had gone from salt and pepper to snow white. What are we changing today? He asked gently. My will, I said. And I want to create a trust. Everything I own, every cent, every asset, I want it protected. And I want it to go to Emma. Only Emma. He didn't blink, just nodded and pulled out a legal pad. I assume we're removing Gregory and Malene, yes. They've had enough from me. More than enough. He looked up at that. I want it airtight. I continued. No back doors, no loopholes. Emma is the beneficiary. She gets everything when I'm gone. And until then, she can access the trust for education, housing, healthcare, or emergencies. I'll decide what counts as an emergency. Altman smiled a little. Oh, I have. And your home, your pension account, the CDs, all of it. If it has my name, it moves to the trust. Understood. And you want to retain full control while living? Of course. Exactly. He leaned back. Emma's a good girl. Always was. I felt something in my throat tighten. She's the only one who still sees me as a person, not a purse. Mr. Altman didn't flinch at the bitterness in my voice. Then let's make sure your wishes are honored. For the next hour, we worked through every item. He asked questions. I gave firm answers. No more uncertainty. No more benefit of the doubt. When we reached the end, he gathered the papers into a folder and looked at me with something close to admiration. I'll have the final draft ready in a few days, he said. We'll get it notarized and it'll be done. Thank you, I said, meaning it. Outside, the air had turned crisp. I walked home slowly, stopping once to buy a small poinsettia at the florist. I didn't decorate much anymore, but I wanted something bright on the kitchen table. Something alive. The moment I stepped through the door, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Grandma. It was Emma. Her voice was breathy, nervous, and warm. I got your letter. I sat down at the kitchen table. You did? I didn't know what happened. Dad and Malign said you canceled your flight last minute. They made it sound like you just changed your mind. Of course they did. I was there, I said softly. I landed. I waited. I saw the photos. Emma went quiet. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I had no idea. I know, sweetheart. That's not on you. I should have called. I should have checked. You didn't know. You're not the one who made that choice. She sniffled on the other end. I missed you so much that day. It didn't feel right without you. For the first time since the airport. Tears stung behind my eyes. But they didn't fall. No, thank you, I said. That means more than you know. There was a silence between us. Not awkward, just full. Grandma, she said finally. Can I come visit next weekend? I have a break from classes. I'll take the train. My heart bloomed with something gentle and painful. I said. The guest room is ready? I'll bring the chessboard, she said. You still play? I never stopped. We hung up a few minutes later. I sat there at the table, hands still resting on the phone. For once, I didn't feel forgotten. I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. That Saturday, just after noon, I stood at the train station in my warmest coat, watching as passengers stepped off the 11:37 from Worcester. The platform smelled like diesel and old rain. I clutched a paper bag in my hands, a sandwich and an apple, just in case she'd forgotten to eat. And then there she was. Emma came off the train wearing an oversized hoodie and jeans, her dark curls tucked under a beanie, a worn canvas bag slung over one shoulder. She looked older than the last time I'd seen her, sharper somehow. But when she spotted me, her face lit up with something pure and unmistakable. She rushed over and hugged me like she meant it. It was that simple. No questions, no apologies, no tension curling in the air between us. Just her arms around me, tight and real. Hi, Grandma, she whispered into my shoulder. Baby, I said. You're here. We drove home in silence for a while. She watched the streets like she was trying to memorize them again. I drove slowly, carefully, letting her take it in. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. But it felt different with her beside me. Back at the house, I made tea while she set her bag down in the guest room. She returned with that familiar ease of someone who belonged, curling up in the corner of the couch like she'd never left. The chessboard sat waiting on the coffee table. We played a game. She won. Then we played another. I won that one, fair and square. Later we sat at the kitchen table, both of us nursing mugs of tea. The poinsettia I'd bought earlier that week sat in the middle, still red, still alive. I read your letter again on the train, she said, tracing the rim of her mug. I've never seen you write like that before. I've never had to, I said. I used to think being quiet was a form of grace, but lately I think it's just made me easy to ignore. Emma looked up at me. I never ignored you. I know. She hesitated. Dad doesn't know I'm here? I figured. I called a couple of nights ago, asked if I'd seen you since Thanksgiving. I didn't lie. I just said we hadn't talked yet. That was kind. She shook her kindness. It was exhaustion. I'm tired of pretending things are normal. That surprised me. Emma had always been careful, diplomatic, the peacekeeper in her fragmented family. Hearing her say that calm, steady, told me she was growing into something strong. You don't have to pretend here, I said. She nodded. Neither do you. We sat in silence, just sipping our tea. And for the first time in weeks, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need Greg or Malign to grovel or explain or spin another story about what went wrong. I didn't need a text or a voicemail or a too-late invitation. I had this, my tea, my granddaughter. I had myself. That evening, Emma offered to make dinner. She cooked pasta with garlic and spinach, and I grated cheese while we talked about everything and nothing. We watched a silly movie afterward and laughed too hard at parts that weren't that funny. Before bed, she sat beside me on the couch and said, Grandma, you won't. I promised. Promise. I can't promise forever, I said. But I'm not going anywhere yet. She smiled, then hugged me again, gentler this time, but no less real. After she went to sleep, I sat in the quiet of the living room, the clock ticking like a slow metronome behind me. I looked around at the pictures on the mantel. Some faces had faded, some frames were empty now. But one picture still stood tall, me holding Emma as a baby. My hair was darker then, my face softer, but the grip of my hands around her tiny body just as steady. I looked at it for a long time. Then I got up, turned off the light, and went to bed. Emma left Sunday afternoon. We lingered on the porch for a while before her train. I handed her a container of leftover pasta, a folded scarf I'd knitted last winter, and a quiet kind of love I didn't need to explain. She kissed my cheek and promised to call on Tuesday. Then she was gone, a quick wave from the back window of the train, her breath fogging the glass. I stood there until the train had shrunk to nothing, then went back inside. The house felt quieter than usual, but not in a lonely way. It was the kind of silence that follows after something important has been said. A silence with shape and weight. I moved through the rooms slowly, picking up mugs, folding the blanket from the couch, and placing the chessboard back on the shelf. When I reached the kitchen, I opened the drawer again. The files sat where I'd left them.